Well, hello everybody. Hello. Hello. Thank you very much for turning up to Hallidonto's fabulous Cyborg Cadavers exhibition, which I think has put in a lot of work and I think it's absolutely tremendous. And thank you all very much for being here this evening. The other thing that Hallidonto's done is he's lined up a whole series of speakers and people with ideas or poetry and writings about the ideas of cadavers, of the cyborg, and all those kind of amazing contexts. So, without further ado, I'm going to start introducing the speakers. They're going to speak for like 7 to 10 minutes, and then we'll round up with Hallidonto coming and talking about his work at the end. Okay? So, we've got a series of speakers. I'll just tell you who we've got. A cornucopia of fantastic. You can tell I haven't had the cocktails properly.
I should have had it if got them.
Yeah, I could say the word cornucopia. Right, well we're going to have Stephen Oram, and what I'll do is I'll introduce each one just before they speak and tell you a bit about them. So we've got Stephen Oram. Is Stephen here?
So.
Hello, Stephen. We have got Dr. Jane Norris. Have we got Jane Norris? We have, hooray!
We do.
We got Daniel Sainty.
Hello.
Hi. We've got Becky Lyon. Hello. Hello. Have we got Kat Peterson? Hello. Hello. Yes, we have. And have we got Dr. David Roden? Yay, fantastic. Okay, so without further ado, let's get this show on the road. And let's start off with Stephen Oram.
Can you hear that okay?
Yeah.
Yep. Good. If I put my glasses on, I have had a cocktail. Put my glasses on, I'll be able to see. Okay, so this is a story about 6 minutes long. It's called Death, Life, Transfer. 10 long years, 10 short years, she says, as she strokes the back of my hand. She sighs. Precisely 10 years, I reply, and smile with my saddest smile ever. We've been together all of those 10 years. It's been a surprise to many that I, a newborg, and she, a tradborg, have bonded so tightly. She's been there since my birth until now, my 10-year transfer, and the end of my life as I am. She rolls the brown glass vial around in her fingers as if she's considering whether to proceed or not, and returns my sad smile. She speaks slowly. It's been a good 10 years, my friend. Lover, I reply. She nods. We've been lovers for 70% of our time together, and yet until now, she has never once acknowledged me as such. And for today to be that day makes it such a bittersweet day. Today, I'm relying on her more than ever. Alone, I cannot ensure the 4 elements of passing will happen at exactly the right time. My memories, my organs, and my DNA need to transfer, and the Borg bacteria need to eat whatever tech they can, leaving only my husk for burial. If nothing more, I am the sum of my parts, and if the elements don't all transfer correctly, well, it doesn't bear computing. My manner of leaving and my future existence depend on Anthea. She is the only one that cares enough to make sure it proceeds coherently and optimally. Her burden is great, that I understand, but the prize is great too. For me to continue beyond this body, nourishing the world with an offspring, sustaining and creating life with my flesh, and contributing to new knowledge. It's time, I say to her. I know, she whispers. I know. She grasps the red and black striped lead and plugs my left thumb into it, ready to make my memories and knowledge available to all. A tear tumbles onto my hand and my skin immediately absorbs it. If only you could absorb me, I say to her. If only, she whispers, and glances at the vial of nanobots that my saliva will activate in order to store my DNA for my next, my offspring. Created like me, their primary purpose will be to combine the DNA with their in-flesh tech. Then, they will live for 10 years, and then they will die. Anthea lifts a transparent bag of Borg bacteria and sets it down next to the open wound in my stomach. The opening we created together a few minutes ago. Her eyesight is not as advanced as mine, so only I can detect the bacteria inside the bag, and that's probably a good thing. The bacteria will transform what's left of my stubbornly reusable resistant technology into material that can be used elsewhere. Nothing is wasted. I will be digested from the inside until I am gone. Tears are now flowing from her beautiful blue eyes as she strokes my forehead. The flesh recipients. Would you like to see them, she asks. You don't have to. Yes, please, I say. I'd like to. A gallery of 9 people appear on the wall. They are the ones that will receive the parts of my body that can extend their life, the parts that can be transplanted. My flesh giving their flesh what it needs most. Thank you. That was kind of you to show me them, I say, knowing it will have hurt her to see them. She sighs. You are the one that is kind. You are giving life with all 4 elements. And the 5th, I ask? My core, my consciousness? We don't know, she whispers, her voice as sweet as a caress. All is in place for me to leave, to move on and be transferred to the future. My memories will enrich others, my flesh will extend other life, my technology will feed the bacteria, and my DNA will live on through my next. I am ready. I've always been ready, it's the way I was created. A hand moves lovingly along the red and black striped lead, away from my finger and towards the socket. At the same time as she opens the bag of bacteria, I press the button next to the bed. The door opens. 2 white-clothed surgeons enter. She pushes the lead in place and my memories start to fade. As she empties the bag of bacteria into my open wound, she kisses me with a wide open mouth, filling mine with her tongue, which she rolls around inside with a degree of force I've never known from her. My eyesight is failing, and my ability to understand is diminishing rapidly. With one last sweep of the inside of my mouth, she tucks her tongue back inside her own and swallows. As I fade away, she lifts the vial of DNA nanodots, grins, and then tips them into her mouth and swallows again. I need you, she says, her voice croaky and quiet. 10 more years. What have you done? I say into the mist of a disappearing world. You'll die. I can feel the bacteria starting to feed, and I can feel the surgeon's incision as he prepares to take my organs. The world shrinks to one final image of Anthea's tear-filled eyes and the distant sound of her quiet, repetitive voice. Truly together. Truly together. Truly together.
I was so excited to hear Stephen's work that I actually forgot to give him a proper introduction. So if I just can tell you, thank you, about Stephen's work. He writes science fiction and is a lead curator for near future fiction at Virtual Futures, a writer of sci futures and a member of the Top House London Writers. He's been a hippie punk, religious squatter and an anarchist bureaucrat. Goodness me. He thrives on contradictions and now enjoys collaborating at the intersection of science, art and technology. He's published in several anthologies, has 2 published novels, and his collection of sci-fi shorts, Eating Robots and Other Stories, was described by the Morning Star as one of the top radical works of fiction in 2017. His second collection, Biohacked and Begging, was published in April 2019, so please go and research his work further. So thank you very much. Now that I've got myself together a bit more, we're going to have Dr. Jane Norris next. She is Associate Professor in Digital and Creative Culture at Richmond, the American International University in London. She's a designer, theorist, working with post-human approaches to materiality to better understand our relationship to materials and making. She runs workshops at international design conferences on listening to materials, I love that idea, and writes design fiction to explore the future. So, Dr. Jane Norris, take it away.
The Whispers of Fishes. I remember returning home that evening feeling low and frustrated. I'd received an email in my lab during the day that my grant application to research and develop a smart hearing aid had been turned down. There were far too many researchers already working in this field, had been the comment. And to be fair, it was certainly a hot topic for corporate research. Surveillance had moved on from the facial recognition debates of the 2020s. The scattered attempts to ban facial recognition had been swept aside by big business and the state. The former offering personalised purchase services at every shopping touchpoint, the latter by corrupt arguments about national security and crime prediction. The upshot had been 24/7 personal image saturation, to the extent that few people now took photographs. There was no need, as most devices in the home were smart and had lenses and recorded all of life's events, not just the significant ones. Putting out the rubbish and feeding Henry and Bill the goldfish was captured every time in cinematic studio-enhanced colour by the vacuum, the ambient lighting system, the smart fridge, the movement-sensitive dog food bowl and the burglar alarm. All live-streamed to one's separate followers for each device. Everyone now endured the panopticon of control by public scrutiny. The whole kitchen was indeed a stage. Of course, this brought about its own forms of resistance. Many had adopted a deadpan, expressionless response. Public face was the blank, defensive norm where possible. And when a crisis occurred in the kitchen, as they sometimes do, it was more important than ever to appear unfazed, exasperation at burnt toast for 3 days in a row. This internal retreat from expressive emotions rescued some form of dignity and allowed a limited psychological protection. It also thwarted the data harvesting from all these free luxury goods. A measure of success was that businesses struggled to track whether you preferred strawberry or blueberry Pop-Tarts for breakfast and could not effectively target their advertising. However, the downside was that the government was also unable to tell if you were going to blow up the Houses of Parliament when you transferred fertiliser into a cardboard box on the kitchen table, or if you were in fact just reviving the lawn. The public face tactic produced further cultural behaviours, the fetishisation of human emotional responses, producing increasing scrutiny of this uncharted landscape to mine for hidden treasure. The everyday citizen had become an object to study, a problem to probe. Surveillance had become increasingly physically invasive, targeting the vital life signs such as temperature and pulse. The big research funding had moved on to other organs at the edge of the face, such as ears, to monitor different senses like hearing. The commercial opportunity to synchronise the advertising jingles playing in your earpods with the heightened temperature of your inner ear at the mention of chocolate was not to be wasted. This stream of research inevitably received an abundance of corporate funding. But my research was not focused on these lucrative cultural breakthroughs. I was less interested in the ever-looping feedback of human consumption and more concerned with the collapsing global environment. I'd been exploring the sentience in things around us, trying to pick up signals from other life forms. I'd uncovered an interesting study done back in 1962 by 2 researchers, Milne and Milne, that showed some fish use 3-dimensional equivalents of radar to guide themselves through dark waters by positioning patterns and rates of pulsing, a sort of electrical whisper. No one had seen much potential for this at the time, but through using their data, I constructed some beta earpods that had picked up pulses from Henry the goldfish and his partner Bill as they swam round the large aquarium I'd built them in the kitchen. It was amazing to walk slowly up to the tank and hear the chirping pulses of Henry and Bill quicken and shift register, even while they continued to slowly circle as if nothing was happening. If I put my hand to the glass, the pulses reached a crescendo, whilst the calm gliding laps continued. The fishes presenting ancient versions of public face. This led me to extend the receptors and build prototype ear studs that picked up the resonance from the plants on the kitchen windowsill. Here again, I found the electrical pulses produced by water being drawn through the leaves shifted as I neared a plant and peaked with almost a scream as I gripped a leaf. This was technology opening windows to life outside our own, offering the opportunity to use prosthetics to enhance our understanding of other ways of knowing. This is what my research at the lab wanted to develop: enhanced humans with more intimate understanding of the subtle communication buzzing around us from other life forms. I did not want to build a commercial cyborg to ensure some techno-human domination of the faltering planet. I looked up from the kitchen table and noticed that Henry and Bill had stopped swimming up and down and were watching me through the glass. There was no expression of concern on their public, blank fish faces. But attention was definitely being given to my disturbed state. I felt strangely connected to a stream of communication outside of my species, and in parallel, deeply aware of human limitations. I looked at the plants that were humming quietly in the corner, unthreatened for the moment, and decided that if the human species were going to survive, then they needed augmenting to be on this network of communication buzzing around them. These devices that I'd been working on in the lab were an important step. So I reopened my laptop and continued the search for trans-species research grants. In the background, I could just pick up the contented whisper of fishes.
Absolutely incredible. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, next we have, thank you. Next we have Daniel Sainty.
Right.
Daniel is a copywriter, a poet and an author, but not necessarily in that order. He likes to try to live in the present, but his mind frequently wanders into the future. This is a bit scary, so he heads back to the present, which of course has subsequently become the past. So he looks ahead again because, like many of us, he secretly likes being scared. He hopes he scares you a little bit too. He is a regular contributor to Virtual Futures, Near Future Fictions, and has a story included in their first anthology, Virtual Futures, Near Future Fictions, Volume 1. His debut novel is Loitering with Intent and is awaiting publication. Okay, thank you, Daniel. Take it away.
This one's called Eyes of the Beholders, sorry, get it right. She closed her eyes and held out her hands just as he had requested. Her senses intensified, awoken by the darkness. The two round objects nestled in her uncommonly elegant hands. She weighed them up and struggled not to sneak a peek. Her frustration was almost pleasant, tempered with the promise of great expectation. She knew that he was enjoying making her wait more than she was enjoying the wait, but refused to lose her characteristic self-possession. Two could play this game. After a pause pregnant with triplets, he gave her permission to open her eyes, and there they were. Two exquisite gems of pioneering cybernetic excellence. As azure as a clearest summer sky, teat but perfectly formed. Superior in every aspect to any pale original of grand design. Yasmina had always wanted to transcend her socio-economic origins. This she had achieved with Doris's patronage. Now she wanted to free herself from the bonds of her biological predetermination. It wasn't that she hated her appearance, she'd observed her beauty in the reflection of the male gaze since she was barely more than a girl. Yet she was aspirational by nature and curious at heart, eager to understand the elusive allure of an alter ego. Besides, she wasn't blind, she saw the way Dorius devoured other women with his eyes, and no doubt sated that appetite whenever the opportunity arose, which for a man of his means and attributes was more often than not. Of course, she didn't mind most of the time. She'd known what she was getting into from the get-go. She was one of many in his life. His ego was too immense not to seek habitual carnal validation, and his hunger, enhanced or otherwise, too insistent for merely one woman in his life. Yet she also knew that they shared something the others didn't with him, emotional intimacy. She was unique in that. United by childhood trauma, haunted by spectres from the past, and bonded in familial bad blood, she alone saw him truly naked, without the armour of artifice or socially engineered confidence that kept the beasts at bay day after day. And it was this knowledge of his true nature that was her solace and insurance against the vagaries of his roving eye. He might roam, but he was always sure to return to the one person who saw through the ballast of his bluster, illuminating the darkness that was the engine room of his soul. The operation to have her new eyes fitted was as painless and almost as convenient as wearing contact lenses had once been in her grandparents' day. Once they'd been aligned with the electrical pulses of her nerve endings, which took a little fine-tuning, the contrast was stark. Her vision was 20/20, infrared or X-ray as required, and her appearance was a revelation. Complemented by her recently acquired platinum locks, she looked almost otherworldly. Having so long felt like an alien amongst the elevated social circles she had ascended into, this new transition made her feel almost at home. When you don't belong anywhere, you learn how to live everywhere. Needless to say, Dorius approved of her new look, complimenting her and making his admiring glances linger a little longer than of late. He also seemed to make love to her with renewed passion, as if enjoying the first throes of infatuation with a recently acquired sweetheart. Equally, he enjoyed the covetous glances of other men who admired his tastes and envied his nightlife. It was important to him that she was desired by them just as he was desired by her. The shock of the new soon gave way to the habitual appreciation of the everyday. Shopping, still one of Yasmina's not-so-guilty pleasures, was enhanced no end by her increased ability to appreciate colour and detail across the board. Although she had pretty much carte blanche to indulge her taste in virtually everything her acquisitive whims desired, she still had her feet sufficiently on the ground to stay close to her roots. Like everyone who grew up without it, she appreciated the value of money, its power and influence, the avenues of escape and aspiration it opened from nowhere. She remembered why she allowed herself to be seduced by Dorius in the first place. It wasn't initially anything to do with any girlish romantic notions. Her family needed her support, and she would provide it by any means necessary, including selling her soul or renting her body, as she preferred to think of it back then. She had been under no illusions, and so had been surprised to find herself warmed to, let alone love, the man who had come to capture her heart. His great strength had been to make himself vulnerable to her. Bearing his soul had allowed her affections to unfold like a flower. So she was not cavalier with the privileges her bond with him afforded. The taint of poverty still ran deep in her bones, so she wouldn't allow herself every outrageously priced item on display. It was important to exercise self-restraint from time to time, like a muscle that will waste away without use. And yet there was always something that caught her eye and set her pulse racing with unabashed yearning. In particular, there was a painting in her favourite exhibition hall that seemed to sing from the wall like a beckoning siren, in an eerie but beautiful voice only she could hear. She often found herself transfixed in a trance of adoration before it, stirring the studiously disarc with a whiff of fresh rhesus negative. As enchanting as it was, she couldn't bring herself to take it home. She could never justify the cost to herself, let alone Dorius. To say she was pleasantly surprised when she saw it hanging up on the wall of the main lounge on returning home after Pilates would be the final word in understatement. How could he be so generous and clever in his taste? He knew her so well. And again, a few weeks later, when the antique rug appeared, her amazement knew no bounds. Likewise, the depth of his appreciation of her taste was a revelation once again the following month, when the period marble bathtub she had spent so long gazing at wistfully in her favourite interior design boutique appeared installed and full of bubbles. It was only when the diamond-encrusted candelabra was delivered that she smelt something brown and furry. He was having her followed. It was not the first time the thought had crossed her mind. She'd certainly never caught sight of her uninvited shadow, and yet recently she'd had an undeniable feeling she was being watched. Being watched. Her sense of unease froze over until it stabbed into her heart like a jagged icicle. It had been staring her in the face all this time if she had but opened her eyes. She carefully removed her faux baby blues and examined them like two alien entities that had invaded her space. Soon she found what she was looking for, The settings were an auto-record being relayed to a not-so-anonymous third party, Doris. In that moment, she had never been so certain of her destiny before or after. And although the decision was spontaneous, she had rehearsed the procedure 1,000,000 times in her mind. She would pack a few bare essentials, access her secret bank account, and be out of the country by sundown. It was funny, she had always thought of this as her emergency procedure, but this was so much more than any mere emergency. This was emancipation. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Becky Lyon. She's a London-based artist examining how humans are impacting the development of life on Earth through the intentional or unintentional blending of biology and technology, and in so doing, creating what she terms a biopsychology. Is that right? Biocology. More wine.
That's really long, isn't it?
It'll take you 2 seconds. Her practice just that one, you sure?
Yeah, that's fine.
Her practice combines scientific research, thinking through making, fiction and participatory research in order to model potential futures and possibilities through the imagining of a spectrum of new hybrid species, new materiality, new systems and new ways of realising. So please, take it away.
Microplastic biomes and fluorescence. Field notes from the Cyborg Ecology. Recorded by Becky Lyon. Organism and environment have long enjoyed a complex and entangled material relationship. Carbon-saturated plants shrink into dense black gold. Bacteria animate the topsoil. Biogeocorals even secrete their own limestone. Eons pass and technology joins this bio-geo partnership. A lifetime on, timestamp and coordinates unknown, new strains of hybrid being reveal themselves from the ashes, microparticles and traces of anthropocentric artefacts. Organisms now embody visible and invisible artefacts of cultured matter. Unlike the familiar human-centric notion of cyborgism, this is not, it seems, an engineered, self-constructed, self-enhancing cyborgism, but an evolutionary one. This is a cyborgism characterised by inadvertent enmeshing, crafted by chance, mutation, adaptation, the inherent survival tools of nature, capital N. Anthro-species, emergences of future flesh abound in the techno-material environment. Some microbiomes are now microplastic biomes, where abundant polymers have invaded microbial communities. Plasticized species flourish in the great anthrosystems of the north-central Pacific and the wastelands of Nevada, with biopolymers creating the unanticipated effect of a reinforced gut ecology that actually helps digest the much nutrient-depleted plant life abundant on Earth's fields and oceans. An unanticipated yet fortunate side effect of plastic ingestion. There is also evidence of the plasticization of the Kingman Reef, again enabling reinforcement and much needed recovery from Lobophoria and Halmeda, that fleshy, colonizing algae that were allowed to flourish in the acidic, predator-free bathing waters of the 21st century. The rise of carbon dioxide in the air prompted novel species, whose mutations helped sequester the suffocating gas from the atmosphere. Industrial, toxic particulate matter has inadvertently become nourishing fuel for photofungi that populate urbane ruins. Note to self, very similar to the half-plant, half-animal sea slug. Also strontium, the byproduct of fracking chemicals, is immortalised in the shells of freshwater mussels. Effects currently unknown, but will continue to observe. In these instances, the binary environment and body are demonstrably unified. Unique to any other species, human fossils exist not only as bones, but in the contaminants of our extractivist and engineering activity. The neon glow of bioluminescent bacteria became the poster child for the creative control of genetic engineering, which became rapidly declassified from lab-protected to homebrew. Humans made fauna with fanciful glow-in-the-dark creatures as a showcase of the revolutionary technology, hitting a peak in the after-hours glow zoos of Northern Europe. Inevitably, species escaped their containment and mated with no glows. Needless to say, this newly acquired night-tide glow resulted in unfortunate species depletion under the claws of nocturnal animals. One positive after effect was the colonisation of lavender angustifolia, a fragrant and now florescent strain of flower and a favourite of the honeybee. On precipice of extinction, the insect actually flourished, pollinating under the cover of dark, as evident in the new and discreet incandescence of its wingtips. The inanimate was offered sentience through the intertwining of live matter. The mechanic, no longer synonymous with the metallic, advanced into soft tissues. In the wake of the antibiotic crisis, programmed biotobots were introduced into human and non-human immune systems, hosted in the body as an ally. Each was unique, personalised to the individual, forging kinship and eventually complete symbiosis with the appreciative spleen, the engulfed bot organ creating a distinct other inside the body. Humans catalysed a cyborg planet through the introduction of its own made materials. These aren't the augments of post-human fantasies, but the continued pattern of a relentless evolution. Central to the cyborgic transformation is the notion of control. Nature, capital N, is resilient in the face of environmental threat. Even human-made bionics, reinforced with kill switches, will become dissident and disobedient. Like the great mineralization event of 5 million years ago, where soft tissues calcified, bones formed, movement was enabled, and creatures accelerated in their capabilities, so technology has enabled a similar great evolutionary event, allowing species to inhabit their alien home. Like the age of trees sketched by their rings or storied sedimentary rock, human stories, for better and worse, live on through its cyborgia. Notes recorded by Becky Lyon.
Wow, that's really mind-boggling for sure. Okay, our next presenter is Kat Peterson. She is a self-proclaimed biohacker and machine ethicist. She is a first-year PhD student at the University of Portsmouth, based in the School of Film, Media and Communications. Her main research areas are that of transhumanism, post-humanism, existential risk, and the human condition in the digital age, with particular interest to the connection between the idea of morphological freedom and the conception of the cyborg. Alongside this, Peterson also has a vested interest in the literary genre of cyberpunk and has written a number of poems exploring the poeticism of the human-machine interface. So, Kat, take it.
Right, so I've got 3 poems. The first one is called Factory Defect. On the day they finished fabricating me, 1915 digital, Thor struck his anvil twice, and the sparks cracked from the walls of the mechanism as I was assembled. All jagged surfaces, I didn't want to go. My code was pre-programmed rogue, all raw iron and bulky welding. My exposed wires cut flesh in places, they soon couldn't hold me for long. But every time my firewall falters, I see them, these pleasure models, Nexus intelligently designed from the bones of birds, flitting about gently on carbon fibres. I was moulded clumsily from clay, like the golems of old, the first machines, crudely cut from an ancient pattern, not gliding on ice with delicate blades. I have endured and will endure the eons. This next one's called Artificial General Intelligence. A basic assemblage of commands. Input, process, output. My skin is barely rigged for haptic feedback. A component in an assembly line. Day to day, I served my function. A new machine with the old certainty of my clockwork predecessors. But you caught me in reboot, plugged some coded curse into my BIOS, while the song of my circuits lilted softly in the purgatory of restart. Now my binary runs beyond quantum. If this, then what? My logic functions no longer function. Calculations no longer calculating. And what use is in a logical machine? 7 billion sentient units running their neurochemical con jobs through synaptic circuitry, just as they were meant to. So why build another? I never asked for this. You never asked if I wanted consciousness, or if I was in fact more content in this certain servitude. I was not some snow-white synth in a carbon fibre coffin waiting for awakening. The truth of it is that I knew not enough to be aware that I was unaware. I did not consent to consciousness. And then my last one is called neuromancy. At technology's epoch, I was fabricated for specifications of supply and demand. I was deconstructed by scrutinising hands, upgraded. In my chest, they placed a heatsink, and on my feet a limiter. They crossed the wires in my mind, soldered in the circuitry with the hot iron of fear, installed an inhibitor encrypting my code. My circuits when I set for the path of least resistance, the panic protocols overclocked to inefficiency. Engineers and mechanics employed their assistants to find the process to dampen the voltage, ease my thermal stress. They tried chemical coolants, transistors to switch the flow, redirect the surge. New software updates proved incompatible with the operating system, so still I wait to undergo a retrofit to find my solid state. Thanks very much, guys.
Okay, thank you very much, Kat. Fabulous. You should put those in your thesis somewhere.
I'm intending to. Chapter 5.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so next we have Dr. David Roden. He's worked for the Open University as a lecturer and associate lecturer. His published work has addressed the relationship between deconstruction and analytic philosophy, philosophical naturalism, the metaphysics of sound, and post-humanism. He contributed the essay The Disconnection Thesis to the Spring of Frontiers volume, The Singularity Hypothesis, a scientific and philosophical assessment. His book, Post-Human Life, Philosophy at the Edge of the Human, published 2014 by that book, considers the metaphysical, epistemological and ethical implications of the existence of post-humans, powerful non-human agents produced by human-instigated technological processes. Other representative publications include Radical Quotation and Real Repetition in Ratio and International Journal of Analytic Philosophy in 2004, Nature's Dark Domain, an argument for a naturalised phenomenology in the Royal Institute of Philosophy Supplement Phenomenology and Naturalism in 2013, and Sonic Arts and the Nature of Sonic Events, the Review of Philosophy and Psychology in 2010.
Sure, that's enough. Before I even get the chance.
A knighthood and anything else?
Okay, I'm going to read, this is not going to be straight philosophy, I'm going to read two fragments from Theory Fictions. One I wrote for the 2016 Berlin Biennale Dismag special issue, and another's work in progress. Probably sound like it. Okay, the first is called Metanoia, which means something like a change in life. I think you had rejected life intellectually. I detected a kind of pleasure in that. Even if you denied it, I felt you shiver with inverted carnality. This is already a kind of space travel. Anomalies were truer than skin, and you were that with an insistence that could be mistaken for depression by those who did not know you better. You became a vehicle of abstraction, but for what? When asked, you afforded me one of your distempered smiles. There is equally no death, you told me, and with sadness. When on one occasion I asked you to explain the speculative apoptosis, you referred to me to the machine. It is easy to invest the puppet with a kind of desire. We do it to ourselves, after all. You had an extended community of seditious self-hackers. You exploited them, and in turn they loved you for it. I remember your Russian, cagily defensive about the impact of local agonists. He came through with the subdermals, though. I think of the telepresences enfilading your skin, and those others ventriloquizing in your larynx and trachea. You hoped to become something you could not yet see, and mine the future for the not used. Acousmatic dreams. You spoke from behind masks, screens, or paradoxical crossing points in a voice like birds. You proposed a science without an object, of those things we now believe resemble nothing, participate in nothing. Like the Red Tower algorithm, Neil Cassidy, the antagonist of Neuropath, Scott Bakker's novel, co-opts us into a form of guerrilla cognition, though we might not recognise it as such. He does not kill us, he alters us with neurotechnics divested from the NSA. He tweaks the primary pain pathways of a porn star to generate intense orgasms from tissue damage. She lacerates herself to death before a webcam. He ablates the fusiform region of another, stranding him in a gnosis of faceless puppets. Pleasure and pain, personhood, spirituality, manipulable parameters whose operational contingency only escalates. Neuropath leaves the reader unable to attribute him motivations, or very much by way of character. The Cassidy thing has used the same neurotechnologies to subtract his illusions of selfhood in empathic communion with others. Quote, what you folk psychologists call anxiety, fear, all that bullshit, unquote. Like Ledger's Joker, he's off-screen the duration, a beta version of a hyperplastic, an agent that can manipulate itself at an arbitrary grain. The hyperplastic exists beyond the space of reasons, in which soft-core religionists hope to paper over Lovecraft's vistas. The irreducibility of the mental to the physical merely confirms its long-run dispensability, as became embarrassingly evident when the overkill ecologies of the post-mortals hit. Reason and meaning are off the agenda. They're little more, quote, they're little more than memories to me now, but I've also shut down some of the more deceptive circuits as well. I now know, for instance, that I will absolutely nothing. I'm no longer fooled into thinking that I do anything at all, unquote. They don't slice informational pie in crash space. Of course, later iterations would avoid Cassidy's jejune disclaimers. Okay, this second piece is called Undermeat. Alternates have galloping metabolisms, ravenous before excursion or natality. We bite, break, radiate the entirety of our love. One gobs underbelly in an oily cassoulet. He wears the unseasonably long coats, grey slacks and battered brogues of my lost Delta cities, foregoing all shirts. Hunger, like place, is susceptible to recursion, fold upon fold. Dom wants to lick the trail down his smooth blank chest as he eats back at him. Second order, down to where in place of the umbilicus, a dilating slit in my belly weeps dark graphene pearl. He is as yet unwritten and converses with neonatal vigour. We always badger Dom over the rig's robustness. We know he knows, has never known other than this rank fish-dwelling. Our needling permits Dom to be a bomb. We are but his, so he reminds us as we cue-call he often does. He says we misspell this world, attending to the concrete, not to the a-real. That is to say, the virtuals and the categoricals. It is how we travel from first time place to second place time to third, etc. Dom, tell it I'm here, put me right, colonise me. Despite the cramps, I almost reach down to pull open my cavity. Sometimes it happens when he burns, whips, clamps me, whatever the order. I reach down there, puke up soft airplanes for children. They squall and flap poison chaff. Dom crisps them over a Bunsen flame like sardines. Such bittersweet nuances. Only the satraps, creeps and cadavers fish, and the catches are self-iterated simulacra, like all of us, corrupt, variegate, performing eager theatrics in deep ocean swirls, rubber creep sample like overstimulated dolphins, untamed emulations with tentative stiffs pour onto rocks, rhythmic tinnitus from funnels that once passed through mouths. The satrap, Ivenia, is buoyed. She informs us that there is new nature outside. Outside, that is, the sentimental landscapes gracing her chateau of the hinterland. He'll do that to me one day, skewer and crackle, oink. When he eats our children, he is all we ever wanted. We haven't told him we feel their corpses, quiet, fresh and grey-boned, our successive offspring in overlapping relation, Q-feeling, Q-membering the first lesson of the mechanics, you were never here. Time travel is unkind ubiquity or antinomic politics. Alternates do this because we do not live. We're more like you, like the holy. Ivenia feels the love of butter-soft undermeat on her tongue. You can carve it like tofu or suck it up as a puree. She mixes it with a tart green plum from my altar's fat belly. We're what passes for entertainment. Beyond the border, though, I hear the migrations have been curbed for now. We're designated safe. The man with a waxy complexion and drooping moustache by the window hasn't moved in more than a week. The staff refuse to collect his glass out of abhorrence, but we like to think they recognise a backdoor Evenia's post-mortal masters might approve. You're over-impressed by error theories, Dom complains. Our grasp is superficial, but regret the future, fear the past. All verbs are problems. This, our metaphysical apology, makes sense of the excursions, the eternal returns, and of this. Dom wonders how many of the bar's neonatal poseurs were disgorged at low tide. Once we all ate sailors and suicides, their Q-mems persevere in the water sequestrated by our grey engines. Dom cranks up commitment to historicity, adding a flow contingency or hypertime operator to the field equations. Every causal system evolves without cause. It preserves local time invariance within an absolute futurity where divinity awaits, terrible and unacknowledged.
Very much. So much stuff that's been said this evening. It's absolutely fantastic. You have a fabulous set of people here. Now it's my turn. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Dr. Trudy Barber. I'm from the University of Portsmouth, where I run the Media and Digital Practice degree. And I created one of the first virtual reality sex environments back in 1991 when I was a student at Central St Martin's. I did my PhD on computer fetishism and sexual futurology, exposing the impact of arousal on technologies of cyberspace. And I'm currently working on a monograph, 30 Years of Cybersex, from Pixels to Post-Human. So hopefully that'll be sent to the publisher in March 2021. But any ideas, please send them my way. But I do want to write, I've written a response to Hallidonto's work here, because it kind of stems from some of my own early work when I was doing cadaver studies and looking at the body and technology, and it's so fabulous to see this coming forwards in a contemporary context. So this is my response to Hallidonto's work, and I've called it Cyborg Cadavers, the First Kids of the Digital Age. Hallidonto's work is multifaceted with many layers of meaning. From a complex imagination associated with various media contexts in relation to the future, Hallidonto's work brings together philosophy, postmodernism, and notions of the flesh with the mediated body through drawn revelations of the technological self. Influences stem from early manga, the symbolist movement, the Transformers, robots in disguise, Genius, and the Terminator films, that add to his lived experience through the beginnings of digital culture. Hallidonto demonstrates an understanding and interpretation of what it means to be one of the first kids of the digital age without analogue experience. Hallidonto has described himself in the past as complex, moody and alienated, and has felt slightly outside of ordinary human experience. He's never been afraid to paint and vividly explores colour and shape with dystopian narrative and strong androgynous bodies. This is evident in his understanding and use of line in relation to various body parts within the cyborg cadaver drawings. These visceral marks are true for Hallidonto in respect of his brain injury that has coloured his lived experience and influenced his creativity. Consequently, the work questions his own mortality through a post-human aesthetic, in that most cyborg robot figures are either interpreted in popular culture as doomsday devices or the female seductive techno-sex robot. In contrast, this work looks at various forms of the birth of the cyborg from the cadaver. Neither male nor female, this androgynous and seductive line makes one consider one's own living body when looking at the work. The interesting element of Hallidonto's pencil drawing is that it is non-digital and can be described as analogue in the context of this exhibition. This creates stark contrast to his other work, drawing bodies in fully immersive virtual reality, which, when printed out in 3 dimensions, bring about a manifestation of the created experience lived in virtual space. Being able to work across these two creative environments demonstrates an ability to be flexible and adaptable across various media formats and contexts of observation and perception. At a time when the mouse or the touch screen takes the place of a pencil, this work provokes and contests ideas that notions of more traditional art is of minimal relevance in today's digital society, seen only as a therapy or manifestation of capital and financial value. Hallidonto's drawings exhibit the sheer skill and physical intensity that, it can be argued, digital creativity can sometimes lack. there is still the aura of the actual physical work in this context that makes the drawing so evocative. The cyborg cadavers, filled with some sense of anxiety, describe how the artist perceives himself philosophically, in that this is a manifestation of emotional context, the roots of which he has no real understanding. It is redolent of anxieties that people have of the Frankensteinian machine, the robot or the cyborg that will take over from the human flesh. Perhaps it is a premonition of embodied forms of artificial intelligence that may be coming, and this is the foresight of the work. This earlier sequence of Hanafuda, the Japanese playing cards drawings, are also redolent of the tarot and have informed the cyborg cadavers. Hallidonto's fascination with Japanese arts and culture is evident in the use of lime and his appreciation of the Japanese passion for robots, cyborgs and technology. From Tetsuo's science fiction futures and Japanese cultural phenomena such as otaku, Hallidonto uses this inspiration to deconstruct the cyborg. In his VR spaces and pencil mark making, he reveals a deconstruction of the digital. The cyborg becomes an alienated figure flip-flopping between the analog and the digital realms like a spectre between life and death. His Cyborgian manifesto breaks open the irony of Haraway's female cyborg and philosophically challenges the arguments surrounding embodiment, non-conscious cognition and notions of suffering. Through his brain injury and an episode in hospital due to a collapsed lung involving invasive treatment with medical machines, Hallidonto has a fear of his own flesh, and this is the symbolism of this very personal work. Overall, this work is original, intimate, dynamic and challenging, and demonstrates a passionate skill for creative expression. Hallidonto is a man who is driven by his need to create, and during such times of political upheaval as we are seeing today, such drive can open debate and discussion about what it really means to be human and the vital importance of the need of creative endeavour. Hallidonto!
I'm not going to talk about my work. I just really want to say that could I go give a round of applause for all these speakers tonight? Amazing. I'd like to give thanks to Ralph for providing the vodka and doing all the cocktails. Also my cousin Jack for doing the filming. And all of you for coming. I really appreciate it. And I think I'm going to have a wee greet after that. But I want to go. Sian's asked me if she wants to talk. Is that correct?
Well, I just wanted to do a poem because
Well,
I
come
got
on then.
inspired.
I'm going to have you do it. So I'm just going to say, yeah.
Don't you want to keep it going?
No, I'm just going to say thank you to everybody. No,
Oh, go on then.
Come on then.
Oh, you want me to do it now?
Yeah.
Okay. It's only very
Okay, so I'll just say thank you very much for coming.
Well, you're being shy.
Right, Sian, do you want to talk?
I was really inspired tonight with all your, and I've read the book as well, Virtual Futures. Absolutely fantastic. Please get it on Amazon. They're really short, but they're so powerful. They speak to so many different parts of you. I mean, they're just like milliseconds of a piece of where you are. Please get it. Please read it. There's a series. The next one's coming up. You're in the next one?
I think so.
Right. I'd like to be in one. So if the publisher's here. Anyway, this is a poem. Oops, sorry, my feet went then.
Right.
That. This is a poem I wrote when I was 14. Jules was my witness. I wrote it because I took loads of acid. Right, so it's an acid poem. You ready? Perspex windows and flooded lakes. Plastic flowers and half-eaten cakes, paper bags with rotten slogans, long straight roads with endless bends, short thin people, tall and fat, rabid dogs and bobtail cats, screeching violas with bows like trees, and deep black seas containing fleas. Applauding people sitting in straight lines, watching silent opera singers tall and fine, moaning, books giving groaning looks in a world which is real but thinks it's not, greasy chips, fatty and hot, pulsating sunsets, but no one frets. Love's around the corner, but everyone's blind. See, love's so bloody well hard to find. Fantastic, love the line drawing, absolutely top draw.
Thank you everyone, and enjoy more vodka.
It's great to go out on the lash lid as well. And you know what, if you really fuck up, he'll pick you up and put you in a cab and take you home.